Okay, as I said, got my start here in West Michigan. I now run 2 nonprofit organizations and 2 businesses. So I have 4 children. My son Simon is with me tonight. 2 nonprofit organizations, what they do. One is called Survivor Quest, which was the previous slide, and that tells stories of survivors of world events. As a background in photojournalism, working on documentaries, that's what Survivor Quest does. The second nonprofit organization is called the National World War I Memorial Foundation, based in Washington, D.C. So I'll kind of walk you through the whole journey and get you up to speed here. So we have an acute focus on World War I. And in World War I, there were the Central Powers that took participation. Germany had 11 million combatants. Austria-Hungary, 7.8 million. Ottoman Empire, kind of the Turkish region, 2,850,000. Bulgaria, 1-2. The Allied powers, we have Russia with 12 million. British Empire, 8-9. And so on down the list. United States, 4,734,991 combatants that geared up in about 18 months' time. The last 2 World War I veterans from the globe. Frank Buckles, who I represent, and Florence Green was England's last World War I veteran. England had a couple of interesting experiences in tracking down the last World War I veterans. They thought they lost all of them. Harry Patch, William Stone, and Henry Allingham were thought to be the last World War I veterans. When they died, all of them in a matter of a few months of each other, I photographed and interviewed all 3 of them, they thought they were done, so they held an enormous event where about 1 million people turned out in England to pay their respects to the passing of the generation. When the Prince got married, the first public display that his wife did was lay her bridal bouquet at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers for World War I at Westminster Abbey. A few months later, an American from the research group of gerontology discovered Florence Green, and she was in the Royal Air Force, and England didn't know about her, so they had kind of a surprise moment of, oh, by the way, we have one more World War I veteran that we forgot about. So Frank Buckles, I worked very closely with the Department of Veterans Affairs in Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, and a few other government agencies, and the American Legion of VFW to make sure that he would be the last verified World War I veteran. There is still, ironically enough, an imposter living in Arizona using his father's credentials to claim that he is a World War I veteran. So every year on Memorial Day and Veterans Day, we get emails saying, have you heard about this person? And we have to say, no, he's an imposter. So the same thing occurred with the Civil War veterans. There were a series of them that acted as imposters as well. So out of the 5 million Americans that served, Frank Buckles was the last lived to be 110 years old. So World War I was a catastrophic war that is quickly forgotten in today's technological, almost video game-esque wars with the drones and surgical strikes and complete control of publicity and public relations like we've never experienced before. It would be in my opinion that it is more tightly controlled now than it ever has been in American or global history. The methods of warfare, the methods of fighting, the deaths, and the way that it is presented to the American public has never been more controlled in American history. This is no man's land of World War I. I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Rex from Kentucky. Now, what we're going to learn about a little bit tonight is about the Treaty of Versailles and the end of World War I. The official ending of World War I was on November 11, 1918. Rex signed up after armistice, but before the Treaty of Versailles, so he was sent over to experience and help clean up. And he saw no man's land, and he described in great detail to me seeing this very scene. This, at one point in time, was a woods. So Mr. Buckles signed up at the age of 16. He attempted to go to several recruiters, and all those recruiters basically laughed at him. And eventually he made it to an Army recruiter. And Mr. Buckles eluded the question of how old are you, because the Army recruiter asked him, how old are you? And he said, well, my birth certificate's in the family Bible at home, and you wouldn't want me to go get that. So with that, the recruiter said, go on, and enlisted Frank Buckles at the age of 16. So now Mr. Buckles lived a pretty interesting life from Missouri, or Missouri as they say it down there. He rode horses to school. One of the famous stories that his daughter talks about is Mr. Buckles' grandfather thought he would be nice and upgrade Mr. Buckles' horse to a racehorse. So Mr. Buckles' way of being social at that time was as we would do in our generation, or maybe the older generation here, is we'd meet up with our friends on the way to school and either walk or ride bikes together and ride the rest of the way and talk. Well, Mr. Buckles on his racehorse met up with his friends on their horses, and his horse looked to the left and his horse looked to the right and thought he was back in a racehorse, and took off and ran off to school, so Mr. Buckles could never talk to his friends anymore. So, kind of a fascinating story. Witnessed a murder at about the age of 10. Lived in a Wild West type town. He began working in a bank full-time at the age of 14. The bank's money was in a time-locked safe, and he turned and the safe locked with the money outside. He took the money back across the street to the hotel, and that night bank robbers rode into town and blew the safe, but the money wasn't there. Mr. Buckles had kept it in his mattress across the street. So literally just an incredible, incredible man, which is why it's captivated us and our family for 6 years or more.